Welcome to Archaic Knowledge Podcast. Tyler Kiwala is a truth seeker. He's been on a journey for many years, awakening from the matrix, and I want to ask him specifically about certain points in that awakening. And he's the co-host of Journey to Truth podcast, and he's been doing this podcast for almost 5 years. Welcome to the show, Tyler.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Just like everyone else, we're all born into this matrix, as you call it. And with our memory wiped, we have no idea what we're doing. We're just going through the motions. And, we always ask questions along the way. And the older you get, the more things don't make sense. But, I never really put too much energy into it because you have the entire world telling you things are one way. And you want to fit in. Most young people aren't really interested in the truth anyway. You want to go meet a girl or go do this or whatever,
Right.
So, that was my life. I was born into a very Christian, religious, Catholic family. So my mom's side was Christian, my dad's side was Catholic. I went to church. I even went to Bible school at one point. I never really felt right about any of it. So when I got out of that, as soon as I got old enough, I learned about atheism and atheists. I had met some people and I was like, oh, you don't have to believe? You mean I don't have to believe in all this stuff anymore? Like, it sounded like such a great thing to me. And I became this, like, I really wasn't anything. Like, I wouldn't say I was an atheist. I just didn't believe what I was being told. And I just didn't know what to believe. And evolution suddenly made a lot more sense to me than the stuff I was being told. And I eventually started asking questions about that even, and things were coming into my awareness that forced you to look at reality through a new lens. And what happened that really forced me into an awakening was my mother passed away when I was 24, almost 25. And my whole world flipped upside down, as you can imagine. But what really happened was I started having experiences at night, negative astral experiences with shadow people, ETs, all sorts of things that I didn't believe in, right? And it was happening to me now. I experienced levitation out of my bed. It's all fantastical stuff that I'm not asking anyone to believe, but it was happening to me and I was afraid to talk about it because I didn't believe in this stuff. So if I started telling my friends, I know they would definitely laugh at me, right? And I suffered in silence for a while until I eventually opened I spoke my truth. I told my father what was happening to me. And as soon as I told him what was happening to me, the universe provided all these solutions. These people came into my life and I was suddenly aware that I could do something about this. I went from believing in nothing to all of a sudden I was forced to believe in everything is possible. Anything is possible. And I didn't have the luxury of disbelief anymore. I was like, this is real. Okay. I thank you for showing me. Now I can't live like this anymore. Like, the sleep paralysis and the attacks were very negative and it was torturous and I missed a lot of work. And I eventually climbed my way out and I had this amazing awakening. And it was very slow. It was like a very slow rollout until I would say 2017, when I had like this aha revelation moment where like the veil was actually lifted and just like it was like an overnight thing. And even all my friends and family, they were like, what happened? They noticed it changed. It almost seemed like reality looked different, like the trees and the sky, everything just looked different and more vibrant. I don't know how to explain it. It's like a pineal gland opening or something, right? Third eye opening. And my friends thought I needed an intervention because I was online posting about all the stuff I was learning. And I probably did look crazy looking back on it. And I, it's so hard to navigate life whenever you're being ridiculed about everything that you believe in or everything that you're discovering. So it was a very rough time for me, but I found some like-minded people. I met Aaron at a conference that I just pulled the trigger on. This conference popped up online. I'm like, I'm going. Like, I don't care. I was just supposed to be there. Something inside of me told me to go. So I asked my dad if he wanted to go, and he's like, "It's up to you." I said, "I have a feeling it'll be life-changing." I wish I saved the text, and it was the most life-changing decision I ever made. And that's where I met Aaron and my co-host. And it was weeks after that we started the podcast as a fun little project, just for fun, with no expectations whatsoever. And 5 years later, we're hosting conferences, filming documentaries, doing webinars, and the podcast is still going. And um, the amount of things that I've learned and had to unlearn over the past 5 years hosting this podcast, and the journey that I've been on has been absolutely incredible. And I've told about a lot of stories in other interviews and presentations, but I'm excited to get into whatever we're going to get into today. But I know specifically one of the things that we really have to come to a new understanding of is that um, what the history of our planet and the civilizations that actually lived here that far predate anything that we can actually imagine. And we have the evidence of the physical structures all over the planet. I mean, you can't, and you can only squeeze so much of that, of what you're seeing, into these narratives that we're handed until we eventually have to start writing a new story. And I think that is one of the most fascinating and important and prominent things that we should be focused on right now, because we're never actually going to know where we're going until we know who we are and where we came from and what actually happened here. And maybe we'll never get like a solid truth, but we have to start exploring these ideas. So I guess that would be a brief bio.
You've had this amazing journey of awakening from the standard sort of person who is asleep. And in the Matrix movie, we have this laid out really clearly for us. We have the people just going about their lives, living and dying, and they never know the truth about what's happening.
Right.
So you've been waking up at an accelerating pace. What sort of information was offered to you by people on your podcast? What sort of types of topics were sort of delved into there?
Well, we started off just exploring. We kind of started off how our journey started off, like what happens in everyone's life. You start seeing like numbers, repeating numbers like 1111 or
Right.
whatever it is, 444. And you see it over and over in life, but you never know what it means until one day somebody comes along, oh, those numbers mean something. Like they could be called angel numbers, numerology, whatever. Like you should look them up. And then you start looking them up, and then you're like, oh wow, this it pertains to me. There's like a message within this that pertains to me. So our first episode was about that. It was just about recognizing that there's these synchronicities and there's these signs. And I guess the podcast kind of evolved with us and our understanding of things. We talked about everything from spirituality to alternative health, with anything and everything alternative, taboo, woo woo, whatever you want to talk about it. We pride ourselves, I guess, in exploring everything and anything um without limitations. And we just, like, even as crazy as it might sound, as unbelievable as it might sound, we will have a serious conversation about it, and we'll interview people and we'll let the audience decide. And the whole premise, journey to truth, is like we're very conscious not to like push our beliefs on other people, because and we don't want to tell people what to believe, because it's constantly changing. As your perception of reality changes, the truth changes. So there's never actually one ultimate truth. And that's the journey. So and that's kind of like the premise behind our platform. It truly is a journey, and the audience is along the journey with us, and it's kind of a beautiful experience, really.
Right. There's so many levels of awakening. I mean, for me, it was 2005. I saw a video of the North Tower falling into its own footprint in just a few seconds. And I thought that's weird, because I had bought the standard narrative for 4 years. And
Right.
then suddenly I'm looking at this, and that I dove into that and started doing research 3 hours a day on 9/11. And that was the window to get me out of the matrix. That was the first step. And then there's been so many other steps. Every single day, it's a new thing. And I go, oh my gosh, they lied to us about this too, every day.
Right. Yeah.
New levels of awakening. And your podcast has really, really helped me, because the people on your podcast are so far outside the matrix in their field, and
Right.
so you get this really deep intel about one specific subject, and it's unbelievable. The secret space program insiders have been key in helping me, and I'm sure a lot of other people, awaken to what's going on in the matrix, um, and outside the matrix. So do you have any specific things you want to talk about, as far as subjects that really really drove home to you how far, how deep in the matrix we've been?
I mean, yeah, and it's a constant discovery every day. Like you have to like slowly peel the layers off of the onion, right? It's like peeling layer after layer after layer, and then you think you're at the middle, and you're like there's like a whole onion left still. You know what I mean? It's like it never ends. But the Secret Space program was the biggest one that really was like this aha moment for me when I learned about it. Um, and I don't know, I always knew there was something more, and it was actually providing some explanations for like some thoughts and ideas I already had, and things that I kind of knew existed that you see in sci-fi movies, and you see that stuff, and you're like, that's real, but you can't prove it. So then the Secret Space Program testimonies kind of started telling that story. But then even that, like that was just one level. But that's what really just, I don't know what it did, but it jarred something within me that just like took the veil down. And what I realized started happening after that, any of the subjects and any of the things that we're learning about, whenever it resonated so deeply, I realized after a couple of years that like it's resonating because I already know it. It's not that I'm learning about this stuff. I'm remembering it from I don't know, past lives or whatever. Something within me, deep within my soul, knows a lot of this stuff already. And that's why I feel comfortable talking about it, as crazy as it might sound. There's something like in my DNA that is just like that understands fundamentally that there is something to this crazy stuff that we're hearing. So you just have to really shift your perspective. And I just think it's an amazing thing to be able to do that and still have people have an audience and still have an audience without it's amazing because you realize it's not just you, and there's millions of people now at this point, the hundreds of thousands all over the world that are having similar experiences, and everyone's perceiving reality through their own lens, and everybody's truth is slightly different, and we can get into that and different dimensions, which actually is very important, and it ties into ancient civilizations as well. But um it's not black and white at all.
Well, you mentioned how you resonate with information. I was standing on the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun with Goran Marjanovic, who's an electrical engineer in the Balkans, who's done a lot of research on scalar waves and other phenomena um, that have to do with pyramids and the Tesla ideas about how to harness free energy. And I said, would you say that human beings are antennas? And he said, resonators.
Yeah.
We're resonators. And I thought, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like you've talked about this many times about how important it is that we look inward to see if we are resonating with information.
Right, and that's the thing about going on that journey. You can you can focus on the external information all day long, but at the end of the day, you're going to remain confused because actually, ultimately, this is a spiritual war and an information war, and there is misinformation and disinfo agents, and there's a lot of bullshit out there intentionally to muddy the waters and confuse us. That's what Satan wants to do, right? Devil, whatever the negative forces, they want to confuse us. Um, so you have to understand how your body reacts to true information and how your body reacts to deception, and you're never going to know that until you get to know yourself. So you got to like really clean up your diet, clean up your energy field, clean up the way you live your life, and start focusing and meditating and paying attention to yourself and being self-aware, because if you're not self-aware, you're a zombie, and that's what they want. So you have to be self-aware, and you have to be able to recognize the subtleties in your body, and when you hear information, how your body responds to that. So you don't even have to necessarily, you get to a point where you don't even have to necessarily listen to an interview or read the article, because it contains a frequency within itself, and you can just feel right off the bat your body's telling you if you should even waste your time on this or not, like if there's any truth here, or if it's completely just deception and whatever nonsensical chaos that you just don't want to give your energy to. So you just really have to, it's like a radar, it's like a bullshit detector, right? And I'm not saying like I've completely mastered it, because sometimes spiritual people especially are the easiest to deceive, because everyone's looking for that experience. Everybody knows there's more out there. everybody knows there's something else, and everyone's looking to grab onto something. And if you have that trickster energy come in and offer you this very beautiful truth, and they'll enamor you with information and all this stuff, and if you don't know yourself, you might take that bait and you might fall for it, and you might go down a path that will ultimately be a lesson for you, and maybe that's exactly the way it was supposed to happen. Doesn't mean it was a bad thing, but you can avoid situations like that as you get to know yourself. So
You mentioned to me on social media, we were talking on Facebook, and you said something about these books that you were gifted recently by someone, I think a stranger that you met in St. Louis.
mhm.
Can you tell us about these books?
Yeah, so we're doing a, you guys familiar with Tartaria?
Yep.
Yeah,
What's
so we're doing a webinar. We're putting together a webinar on Tartaria. It's going to be December 17th on our Patreon, right? We do monthly webinars, which has become my new favorite thing to do. But whenever I consciously set the intention that I'm going to go down this rabbit hole, the universe shows up. My guides, ain't whatever you want to call them, they show up and make sure that the right information reaches you, you know, if you're open to it. And I I still do construction on the side sometimes, build decks and do things. And I was on a job where we're repairing this guy's deck, and I couldn't help but to look through his back window and see this whole library of books. And I saw this history of St. Louis book from like 1909 or something like that. And it just looked like it belonged like in the Vatican or something. You know what I mean? Like it didn't look like it belonged on his shelf. And I wasn't going to say anything, but my coworker, um, I just wasn't going to say anything about the book. I just thought it was interesting. I told him about it, and when we were leaving, he said, "Hey, my friend wants to see your book collection." And I was like, "Oh man, okay, whatever." And he's like, "Oh yeah, come on." He was so excited. He's a history teacher, actually, and he has this insane book collection. And I was like, he was like, "Which book?" And I felt bad. I felt like almost embarrassed to say, "Yeah, I was looking in your window and I saw this book," but whatever, I didn't care. And he gifted me the book, and he said, take it home, read it." And I was like, "Wow." He goes, "I could do you one better." And he went out to his shed and had these boxes of books. And there are these books on the history of St. Louis, where I live, from the 1800s, literally written in the 1800s. And they're like almost turning to dust. Like the bindings are coming off, they're old leather bindings. They have like the gold, like like the gold lining on the outside of the pages. You know what I'm talking about? Uh, and there's all of this incredible, like it's not necessarily lost history. It's just not known. You know what I mean? Like it's unknown. So I guess it would be lost, but um, and it had just amazing information about the World's Fairs, who the committee of 200, well, all the secret societies that were involved in building St. Louis. And talked about the Knights Templar, the Freemasons, the Scottish Rite, all these other secret societies that some of them I wasn't even aware of. And it listed like all the names of each guy who was involved, and their backgrounds and where they came from and what families they're from. And it's unbelievable. Like it's just, you're like, wow, this is the entire United States, not just St. Louis, but it was all founded by the Freemasons, right? And these secret societies. And it tells a lot about what they believed and all of this insane stuff that really is, it even once you get into like the World's Fairs and stuff, it talks about it being a universal exposition on a higher plane of a higher planes. Like they're like, you have to read between the lines, but they're talking about like this advanced civilization and like other dimensions. And they're not telling you, but they're telling you if you understand like how to read between the lines. And I'm just like blown away when I'm reading stuff in these books. And the World's Fairs are tied in with Tartaria, as you know. And people think, how did they build all this stuff in like 2 or 3 years? And then why would they just destroy it all after a World Fair? It didn't make sense. And there has to be, a lot of these buildings are way older than we thought. And there has to be an advanced civilization that was erased from history. And we're discovering that there's CIA documents that prove this. I found 3 documents through our research that really like a skeptic could not debunk. If anyone thinks that there's not a cover up, like, you got to explain to me these documents then. So we're just, the books, going back to those books, they just provide tons of information about the history of how these cities were actually developed and who came here and who was, the founder of St. Louis, Laclede, Pierre Maclede, St. Maclede, I don't know, something like that. Nobody knew. The book even says no one knew where he came from. They didn't know anything about him besides he came from France, I think, at the time. But he was like this very mysterious figure. And the Laclede coat of arms has the griffin on it. Well, what's on the Tartarian flag? The griffin. And like that Laclede coat of arms is prominent here in St. Louis. And there's griffin, the griffin, there's like statues even and stuff like that. So and it also talks about Asia's involvement in the World's Fairs. They were one of the most involved groups of people, cultures, and one of the first ones to sign on. And I forgot what, not, I can't remember the exact flag it was, but the flag at the time was a yellow flag with a dragon on it that looked like almost looked like a griffin. Arguably, it could be a griffin or a dragon. Well, Tartarians we can prove that they're related to the Mongols and the Russians and that whole society, Asia basically, or Eurasia, Europe and Asia. So there's this real trail of evidence that ties those people and this advanced civilization all the way into the United States, into St. Louis. And it was Pierre's son, Laclede's son, who actually it was his idea for the World's Fairs. And he's just a real mysterious figure. They constantly use the word universal exposition. Like, I don't know. I think they're hinting at like ET races or higher advanced civilizations that were involved, but the way they word it, they just it's like a play on words. They kind of trick you a little bit, but those books are full of information like that.
And you're going to have an in-depth treatment of this on your Patreon, Journey to Truth on Patreon?
Yeah, it'll be our webinar on Tartaria, which might end up being a two-part thing because it's just way too much information.
Yeah, it sounds like it's an incredible amount of information. You mentioned the World's Fair, and there's this movie, Tomorrowland, that you also talked about just a few days ago. And it has to do with the 1964 World's Fair in Queens, New York. This young boy who's an inventor, sort of a little genius inventor, goes to this fair and he takes a ride on a water horse and he gets transported into something called Tomorrowland, the future, and he sees what's going to be happening. And then we follow him as an adult who is a little bit disgruntled because things didn't work out the way he wanted. It's an amazing movie full of disclosure, and this World's Fair theme seems prevalent, and I wonder what you think they were doing.
Well, like I said, the book that I have describes the World's Fair as a universal exposition upon higher planes. Now, you tell me what that means. A universal exposition upon higher planes. A higher plane would be another dimension, right? Well, the Tomorrowland movie, it literally talks about an advanced civilization that was built out by a secret society to plus ultra secret society in another dimension. And there's no coincidence, I don't believe. And it's interesting, like the kid, he was in It's a Small World ride. And when he gets off the boat and onto the portal that takes him to the other dimension, if you look behind it over his shoulder, it says SSP right there on the wall. So I'm thinking, okay, so they're telling you that's not just like anytime you're going through these jump rooms, like it's not just taking you like from point A to point B, you're in another frequency, you're in another reality. And that's how they maintain no security breach, because if you go to this world and then you don't know that you're actually in another dimension and then you come back and tell people about your memories, well, there's no security breach because you're remembering something from a different reality. So it's really interesting that that whole movie is, the whole premise is based on the World's Fair and civilization, advanced civilization that is being developed out in another dimension by a secret society. And then the secret society in the movie, it's Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla. Oh man, there's 4 people. I can't even think of it.
Jules Verne.
Jules Verne and yeah, I don't know. I don't have that memorized, but it's four prominent inventors, right? That formed this secret society and developed out this advanced civilization.
Gustav Eiffel.
That's what it is. Yes, thank you. And they you just have to start wondering, like, is the movie trying to tell us something about not only the World's Fair but Tartaria, Tomorrowland, right? So it's still a T, and in the movie they give the people a coin with the letter T on it, and that T is your invite to that dimension, right? But it's like T for Tartaria. It's like Tartaria and Tomorrowland, I think, are the same place. And a lot of the information that we're coming up with on Tartaria, which is new information coming from like QHHT sessions, like Sherry Divband, some of the children that she works with. When I put the flyer out for Tartaria, she flipped out. She messaged me. She's like, "This is crazy because I've been regressing these kids and working with their higher selves, and information is coming through about Tartaria from the children now." And she provided like a 17-minute video of all of her just explaining all this information that's coming through about Tartaria that it's new now, and it has everything to do with other dimensions and frequencies. Basically, it was a civilization that was built in a higher frequency, right? And as the frequency of the collective consciousness is lowered, that reality becomes imperceivable. You cannot imperceivable anymore. So you can't, you would never know, but there's going to be remnants of it. And it turns out that not all these structures, even ancient structures, are all built in one dimension. They'll have a foundation in the 3rd dimension, but there'll be more to that structure that's out of our visible spectrum that we simply can't see. So we have to really start expanding our minds and start understanding dimensions and frequencies and energy and what is even reality. And it's just, it sends you down a whole new rabbit hole. And, it's really out there information, but at this point, like more and more information is coming forward that kind of proves that, well, we know we can't believe what we've already been told. So we have to explore all explanations and possibilities, right?
Yeah, so it's really interesting, to look at all this, especially that you mentioned a CIA cover-up, right? So
yeah,
there was a part of something related to Tartaria that the CIA covered up, and we know they covered up a lot of interesting things that they only view as pseudo science or whatever right now, that they've been declassified. A few examples being that book called the Adam and Eve story, that describes the cyclical cataclysm that occurs every 12,000 years or so. And they've also done some stuff regarding Mars. So they employed remote viewers, guys like Russell Targ and Harold Pothoff were working for the CIA to go back in space and time to look at specific coordinates on Mars without knowing what's out there. But they presented all the interesting sites on Mars, such as the face on Mars, the Inca city on Mars, the pyramids on Mars. And those remote viewers that were like really capable people with extrasensory perception. So Russell Targ was capable of, when he was handled an envelope with something written inside, a note inside, without opening the envelope, just by, bringing his hands like this, feeling the odor of that, he would then know exactly what's written within the envelope. And CIA did not deny the powers of these people. They also wanted to extend the reach to see how far these powers can go, and they could transcend space and time. So these people saw on Mars interesting, amazing things. So they were sent millions of years ago in time, and they saw, pyramids and the giants and an entire civilization there with their atmosphere collapsing, and they were pretty much in need of gold. So that's why they go with those huge spaceships towards Earth. A part of them remain on Mars, hoping for their brethren to return, with the material, but apparently the situation kind of escalated. So And it's not only the CIA, it's also the Chinese. They also covered the the Qigong wave. That was like absolutely amazing stuff. And we have videos of Qigong monks using their energy for massages, or
Yep.
also directing it, starting a fire with their bare hands. So it's incredible stuff. So my question for you is, do you know of any, because people with extrasensory powers exist all over the place. Yeah, we might have latent genes, some of us, but some of us have them active. So I'm sure that remote viewers exist even today, although most of them, maybe they haven't discovered their powers, or not connected with them, but some of them are. So are there any remote viewers that are reaching out to you or to other people in the community to go back in time to find out things about Tartaria?
That's really interesting. I haven't even considered reaching out to a remote viewer and having them remote view that era. It would have to be a blind target, obviously, because if you front load them with, oh, I'm going to have you remote view Tartaria, like then their own imagination can take over, whatever. But apparently everything you can imagine is real anyway. But I'd have to determine a way to come up with a blind target and do that, but it would be very interesting. But the remote viewers definitely have, verified a lot of like secret space program type of stuff, and a bunch, not just that, but that's the first example. A number of things that like I gave my friend Jessica Jones a blind target of something specifically 27 levels below Area 51. With this guy came out with this testimony, claimed that he was in the Air Force and he worked underground at Area 51. I didn't tell her anything. I just gave her the blind target to see if what she would come up with. And what she came up with was like astoundingly accurate, like compared to his testimony, like some of even the same words. Like it was really incredible. But so it's amazing what these people can do and these gifts and the way they can verify this stuff. And we know the CIA has been using, the psychic spies for decades now, and they've disclosed as much. But then there's I think even more abilities that they're working with that they just don't disclose. They admit, oh yeah, we have remote viewers and we were able to accurately determine this, but they don't tell you about the real psychic or psionic abilities that these people actually have and what they're really able to do. And if they're doing it, there's no reason other human beings can't tap into the same potential. So that you don't have to work for an agency or the government to be one of these people.
Yeah, there were so many people such as this. I think one recent example is that of Nikola Tesla, but there are countless personalities that could tap into their powers.
Yes, right.
Well, for people who are new to this idea that we live in a matrix that is a thought control matrix controlled by various groups, I mean, it sounds like a crazy idea that we might have been lied to about virtually everything by persons who are in the vast minority. I mean, much less than 1% are in charge of this weird matrix that we live in. So people might not know about this. So for people who are new, we have Disney as one of the controllers, one of the control systems used by the people in control. And they're putting out this movie Tomorrowland with lots of disclosure in it. So do you have any ideas about why Disney, part of the control system, would be disclosing very interesting secrets and clues in their movie Tomorrowland to us, to the slaves, the sheeple?
I mean, well, part of the Illuminati or the whatever cabal, part of their rules are they have to tell you what they're doing to get your consent. Even though you don't actually consciously know you're consenting to it, if they show you what you're doing and you don't say, even though we don't have the ability to stop them anyway, we do if everyone stood up together. But it's convoluted anyway. If they show you what they're doing, it gives them consent, and they somehow escape karma and whatever, blah blah blah. And they do it through movies in the form of science fiction and comedy a lot of times, and they know that people are going to watch that and just write it off as that science fiction or comedy. Never. And they know they're like putting this stuff out. They're like, these people are so dumb, they have no idea that this is real. that what we're showing them is actually happening. And it sounds so crazy that they definitely won't believe it's real. Like, because they have us so brainwashed and programmed to believe things are a certain way, and they just keep repeating that lie over and over. And like, it literally is programming. So that's why we have to deprogram and uneducate ourselves so we can understand that everything we've been taught is a lie, including the fundamentals of like mathematics and physics, which there's a guy recently, I saved a video, I haven't shared it yet, but he proves with mathematics using their own equations provided to us that the very fundamentals of mathematics is wrong and it contradicts itself. And to build on a cracked foundation, it's only going to end up in disaster, right? It's going to collapse. And that's what's happening right now. Like, all of these fundamentals of everything that we think we knew were built on a cracked foundation. So it's all collapsing in on itself right now. But it's like we heard people tell us that everything in the textbooks is a lie. Now we have people doing the math, right? Using math to debunk itself. And they were realizing that this was designed this way. They release physics books, textbooks, and they leave out specific parts of equations to keep these incredible minds from ever discovering the possibility of time travel or traveling faster than the speed of light, because the physics, like, they literally leave out parts of the recipe. So yet you hit this dead end, and this most brilliant minds in the world who know this information inside and out, they're going to tell you it's not possible because they were given the wrong recipe. If you give that brilliant mind the right recipe, they're going to tell you that everything's possible and some.
Well, you have had Ken Rolla on your show a couple of times, and he talked about different types of mathematics based on, let's say, 5 fingers, right?
Yeah.
If a species has 5 fingers, they're going to develop a certain kind of mathematics. Let's say a 10 base, right?
They call it base 10 mathematics. Yeah.
Base 10, okay. And then if, let's say, you had 6 fingers, well, then you're going to develop base 12 mathematics, right?
Yeah.
So can you go a little bit into that?
Well, so you have to explore the possibility that we were engineered and we weren't created via evolution, and it wasn't all that is. So what's interesting is, Scott, I have to rewind a little bit. Tartaria disappeared from the maps around 1850, in the 1850s. Well, guess what also happened in 1859? Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. So they erased Tartaria from history. We have the CIA documents to prove it. And then we have Charles Darwin's theory of evolution plugged into the collective consciousness at the same exact time right after that happened. So you just have to question the whole theory of evolution to even comprehend what we're getting ready to talk about with this base 3, base 5, base 10 mathematics, right? So if the original beings, let's just say, had 3 fingers or 6 fingers, then you would be working in 369 mathematics like Nikola Tesla was talking about. But if you engineer a race of people with 5 digits and you give them base 10 math, it's not in harmony with the universe, with the universal physics, the universal equation. So it's going to always be at odds with itself, and you're always going to be hitting dead ends. It's going to be really clunky, and that's what's happening right now. So it's just something we have to really go back to the drawing board with everything that we think we know. In reality is just how we perceive energetic frequencies, and we perceive energetic frequencies through our 5 senses. Well, in our 5 senses, and then that determines our reality. But there's more than 5 senses. And once you expand what you can perceive, then that expands what can be real in your world. So it's just by the expansion of energetic frequencies and the perception of energetic frequencies, you can perceive things that we were told weren't true. And you can even start to see them. That's why you can be standing in a room next to somebody and a shadow person or something can walk across the room, and one person will see it and the other person can't, because this person on the right is now perceiving frequencies that this person has yet to expand in their awareness into. So that's how we have to start viewing the world. And it's just really interesting. I know it gets kind of confusing sometimes, but it's whenever somebody tells you this is the absolute fact, that's a big red flag, because the absolute fact is going to change as soon as your perception of reality changes.
Well, they've done experiments with children on video showing that when the children are blindfolded, they can still see what's happening in the room. And the idea is that it's through their pineal gland. So that's let's say, sense number 6, the third eye, being able to actually see what's happening without using our standard binocular vision. So you mentioned Tesla and 369. As soon as you said that, it relaxed me, because it feels like whenever like a large chunk of truth is sent out into the universe, like you just did with that 369 and Tesla, it just feels so good to me. It's like we really need these keys to unlock this prison of the matrix we're in. I hope that people listening who don't have any idea what we're talking about can just hang in with us and consider for a moment that what we're saying has some basis, and then go research it on your own. So you talked about various experiences that you had that were negative when you were younger, sleep paralysis, various beings coming to you in the night. Now, there's a positive experience you had, which was with an inner earth being. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I definitely can. I tell this story a lot, but it has everything to do with perceiving things in a different frequency. It really does. And whenever she appeared, this woman phased into my reality. The entire frequency of the room changed. It became so, I don't know, if elevated, that I actually couldn't really function or move. I became frozen. But I realized that they had to shift these higher dimensional beings can't actually they can't be a part of the third dimension. It's too dense here. It literally physically will damage and hurt their body. Negative thoughts, all these negative frequencies and everything that the third dimension is made up of at this point in time now. These higher dimensional beings, they just can't exist in that frequency. So whenever she phased into my reality, she had to shift the frequency of the room in order to make herself able to appear, even though she was still transparent and only half of her body showed up. But yeah, it was absolutely amazing. I was meditating, and I had discovered about inner earth civilizations, right? And then I realized that, well, through all these people that were talking about it, communicating with these beings, they're making it sound so easy. They're like, yeah, I just meditate and then I talk to them. And I'm like, well, why can't I do that? And I just, so I started setting that intention. I would meditate every night, setting the intention that I want to communicate with a being from inner earth. And after about a month of doing that, that's when this woman phased in, and it was a whole wild experience, which Jack, but it was profound. And the message that she gave me was, honey, you're not ready yet. And she told me, it was telepathic, for one. It was telepathic. Everything's downloaded. It's emotional. It's all at once. It's like thoughts, words, visions, memories, emotions, everything you can imagine, all in an instant, all in one bundle. It's overwhelming because we're not used to speaking that way. But it was like this whole download, I guess you could call it, of like why I wasn't ready. Like, I'm here to do a mission. And I don't even know I haven't even remembered who I am yet. And here I am trying to communicate with these higher dimensional beings. And I completely, I was off mission, right? Like, I completely gave up everything I was doing here because I had become obsessed with communicating with these beings. And they told me that I'm not ready. And focusing on that has nothing to do like with what I'm here to do. So it was like this whole beautiful message.
The subconscious downloads information at about 83 gigabytes a second, and the conscious uses only, I don't know, a few 10 or 100 kilobytes per second, when downloading information. So it's really plausible to get, a chunk of data, just like you said, through the subconscious mind that runs at such intense speeds.
Interesting. I didn't know those statistics, but yeah, that's what it was like. It was just like in an instant. It's like plugging in a computer program or something. It's like, oh, now you know all this, and you just not process it, and you have to have a fast processor to do that.
Can you talk about the different densities, which we also call dimensions? Because the thing for people who are new to a lot of this stuff, new to the secret space program, new to off-world races, advanced races that team throughout the universe, maybe we should talk about the basic structure of the universe that we've been able to ascertain by talking to secret space program insiders who come back to us with this knowledge. So can you give us some thoughts on the frequency realms that we call dimensions or densities?
Yeah. So, well, density, I basically described it already. Um, it's all about your perception of reality. Like I explained basically a density is like a composite of wavelengths that create an experience, right? So if you are standing next to somebody, you see something they don't, you're technically, by definition, already in another dimension, in a different dimension than that person. And there can be as many different dimensions as there are people if everyone is at a different frequency. Now, there's more like the consensus realities. When enough people believe in something, it becomes a reality, like more solidified than just specific to the individual. So, I think like there's, you call them like pocket realities, I've heard them described as, or time bubbles, where or like the Tomorrowland, where it's existing in a frequency where these things are possible because everybody in that dimension understands that it's possible, and it's just become common everyday knowledge to them. So I think, perceiving different dimensions is just how you perceive reality. And so if you want to look at dimensions that way, everyone could be living in their own dimension. That's why you can be standing next to somebody on a sidewalk, and they believe in an entirely different set of things that create an entirely different reality for them, and they're living out their life in that reality, and things happen in their life that are responding to their focus. And that's the matrix, right? The illusion that you focus on. The and what, I forgot how it is. This the illusion responding to your focus or something like that. It's a matrix.
So what do you think of the inner earth and the beings residing there? Do you think they're on the same plane of existence, in the same dimension as we are, or how can we? I mean, can we reach the inner earth if we find the entrance, or do we need to do like a shift to go like through a portal or something? What do you feel about this?
I think both. So there's this old German book we covered in our Hollow Earth webinar, where this group of Germans, basically they ended up being trapped in South America somewhere on an expedition, and they were being hunted by the natives. This is like in the 1500s, and they ended up being hunted by the natives. They found this cave, and they realized that the natives were afraid to come in the cave because of these beings that apparently lived in the cave, right? So they realized they found a safe place, but it was completely unsafe for them to come to the surface. Anyway, they were able to create a way of life, and they lived out generations in the underground. And this was a whole subterranean race of these Germans in the 1500s, and they dug deeper and deeper. Well, they didn't dig, they were exploring this cavern system that just kept going deeper and deeper and deeper. And after so many generations, like they were having children, developing out cities and everything underground. Like they had found a way to live. It's some fascinating story. And they were doing some tunneling eventually and exploring and expanding, and they broke through this into this other reality. And they thought at the time that they broke through they thought they literally tunneled all the way through the planet after so many generations, and they thought they came out on the other side, but actually they came out in the core, and there was like this advanced race of beings there, and all this unbelievable fantastic stuff that isn't supposed to exist. This is a documented testimony from the 1500s. So if that's true, that means that there is a reality down there that does exist in this frequency that they were able to encounter. So I believe that does explain some of it. I think there are civilizations that are still in the third dimension that are just far more advanced, and that they live literally beneath our feet, in these cavern systems in the hollow earth. And that's a whole different topic to explain how all that works. But there's also the aspect where people explain that it all occurs in another dimension. And you'll never find some of these entrances that are talked about in this ancient lore and stuff, because it's frequency specific. You can go to Tibet, you can go to Mount Shasta, you can go to Mato Grado, or whatever it is, Mato Grado in Brazil, like to these places where we hear that there's supposed to be an entrance, and you won't see anything, because those might be dimensional portals, those might be entrances. And what's really interesting about that is there's a documentary on Amazon Prime called The Legend of Taos, Tayos. It talks about an ancient cave that was discovered in the 1860s by this man who claimed that there was an inner earth civilization down there. And And then they sent back teams, I forgot, like no one went back there for decades until they wanted to go on another expedition. Some people learned about it. They found the man who made these claims, and the military even went back and they verified the existence of the cave, but then they never went back for the second expedition to go inside. Anyway, eventually, years later, they finally sent some teams inside this cave. And what's interesting about this documentary is it just starts off as a mainstream documentary about a cave, and then they bait and switch and start talking about inner earth and dimensions and all this stuff. It's wild. But what they described is this team, what they experienced is there's a physical door and a non-physical door, which is like a dimensional door. And there's two different entrances into this underworld. And the physical door, it's I don't understand. I don't know exactly how it works, right? But that might not take you to this grand, beautiful place. But there's this dimensional door that they talk about, where if you go through that entrance, it takes you into this other civilization that is residing beneath our feet, technically, but they're in a higher frequency. And that door can just be like on a rock face that you'll never see in this reality, but it might phase away if you're at the right frequency. And some of these people on this expedition, they had experience seeing beings and people in there, even physical footprints. They saw orbs of light. One of the guys had missing time, and then he got his memories back from the missing time, and like they were camping in the cave. It's such a deep cave they were camping, and what happened in his missing time was these beings came and literally came to his tent in the middle of the night, and they told them about their world and showed them that they all exist and whatever. That's a documentary on Amazon Prime, The Legend of Teos. But that proves that they talk about a physical door and a dimensional door, meaning that there is probably a physical reality to all of this, and then there's a dimensional reality. There's portals that take you to a much higher, more advanced civilization and exposition on a higher plane.
Yeah, super interesting that you mentioned the two variables possible here, with one being like the physicality and then having the other spectrum. Because I'm looking everywhere on the globe, and here I'm not talking only about ancient structures, but I'm going to start with the ancient structures. So they're spanning all across, Turkey, South America, China, Europe. They're spanning they're networks of caves that once formed cities, and those can be found pretty much all across the globe. In Turkey, they're discovering one year after another. I think there are tens of such cities underground, and I'm thinking like at Genghis Khan, for example, they haven't found his tomb, and they know where to look. The specific geographical region, they haven't found the tomb. And then we have all these tunnels. And what I discovered, something very interesting recently at the border, because I'm in Romania, and at the border with the Republic of Moldavia, there is an underground city that's built pretty much recently. There is like a wine bank there. The most exquisite wines lie there.
Oh.
And they're also extracting rocks. They're extracting minerals. And you won't believe how long this network spans. It spans for 80 kilometers. That's about 50 miles. So that's only the city that you can visit in a bus or by walking. And then there's also 25 miles worth of mines from where they extract the minerals. So in total, it's more than 70 miles that stretch underneath, and it's been built only recently. And there are thousands of people visiting that. They also have like marathons inside and all those events, and I'm thinking like, I know such civilizations have lived in the past and have developed underground, but the fact that today, so at present, they built this from their own free will. They wanted to do this, for different purposes. But in the past, what I've noticed with ancient civilizations, they built a lot underground to protect themselves from what was happening on the surface,
Right.
and it's pretty crazy when we look at the examples in India that look like the bunkers, in China as well. We have some stuff here in Romania and they're pretty much all over the globe. And then we have the Vedic texts, the Hindu texts, the Mahabharata specifically, that describes such an ancient war that took place, at some point in time, roughly 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. And pretty much when we look at those texts, we identify cities in the Indus Valley, where the Indus Valley civilization lived, like Syria, Iraq, up to the Persian Gulf. We found there. So there were cities there that the Mahabharata describes were wiped out, and we found Mohenjo-Daro. We see that everything was wiped out, and people back then had, sewage systems. They had the multi-level buildings. They had the toilet on the top floor, so they were pretty advanced at that point in time. So civilizations took refuge underground, and it's only natural to think of this as the physicality, the physical dimension that you describe. But then I think when we look at texts such as the Book of Enoch, and we learn about the fallen angels that were imprisoned in Tartarus, somewhere under the ground, I think here's where they permeate the physicality, where they build the prison for these entities that reside today on Earth, and they rely on certain frequencies in order to reach ourselves. So
Right.
yeah, I definitely believe there's an inner Earth. I also had an encounter with what I believe was a shapeshifter, because there was a guy at some point that I met at this event. It was burnt all over his body, and he attended this event for some reason. I don't know. And after about 3 or 4 years, I went to this event again, and I saw the same guy who healed all the burns on the body. He had like severe burns, and now his skin was glowing red. It was really fresh. I don't know how it's humanly possible to do such a thing. And I think he noticed me, and when he passed by me, he gave me a look. Like he stared at me while he crossed, like he knew, what I was thinking. He knew that we met, in the past, and I'm making all these connections.
Yep.
And it's very interesting that you guys mentioned about the Matrix. I want to know your opinion on this, Tyler. Do you feel that people, like everybody that's plugged in on Earth, are we all in the Matrix and we have to escape, or are there people that incarnate here on Earth and are already outside of the Matrix since they're babies?
I think both. Yeah, there's no way to actually know, but I definitely think that there are people born into this world that are, I don't know, already resonating at a higher frequency, and they're just not going to fall for the illusion, right? And they're going to see through a lot of it. But they're still born into this world where it's constantly bombarding them, and it is a struggle regardless. But I definitely think people are born into this world that understand that it's a matrix, and then they're here to shift that reality. But going back to, oh man, there's so much you said that I want to touch on. So I talked about the documentary that talked about the two entrances, a physical entrance and a dimensional entrance. Well, there's a book that you should look into. It's only available in Spanish. It's not even in English yet. It's called The Lost City of Manoa. It's a Atlantean civilization that it's like an offshoot of Atlantis. You're not going to find much about it online, that book, by the way. But it's an Atlantean civilization, an offshoot of Atlantis that never was destroyed. And it was like an Atlantean outpost. And that's
Hyperborean.
No, this is the Arios. They were after the Hyperboreans. So there's like, in the book they describe all the civilizations on planet Earth since the beginning of time. And the original one were the Polaris, which were the unimaginably tall giants that are like unbelievably tall, that we think are like frozen into the rocks, or that might even be our mountains and stuff, and those gigantic trees. They weren't even fully physical, but then they became physical. So it talks about the Polaris civilization, and then it talks about after that was the I think was Lemurian. I forgot. No, the Hyperboreans. So it was the Polaris civilization, then the Hyperboreans, then the Lemurians, then the Atlanteans, then the Arios is what they call. So they and they talked about every race of civilization on this planet since the beginning of time. So millions, and they talked about this, the very first race, the Polaris, being existing here for millions of years as giants, right? And if we even consider any of that information, it's hilarious how what they're trying to do now and make everybody focus on the Bible and Jesus, and like in this like very little like modern man create like has nothing to has nothing to do with the history of the planet, right? It's just this little bullshit history that they're giving us to believe in now. Like, what about all these other civilizations that were here millions and millions of years before, 5,000 years ago? So, but it talks about in that book, this guy spent 13 years in the Amazon forest looking for in the Minoan Mountains, looking for this portal that he had heard about from the locals, this Atlantean city. And after 13 years, he eventually found it. He went into the city and he's seen all this amazing stuff. And they told him that history, and he wrote a book about it. Anyway, they described to him two doors as well. They said there's two doors to our reality. One where you go in and you can come back out, but then there's a dimensional door that you go in and you don't come back out of it. And it has something to do with like once you like enter that reality, like you somehow exit the game and you can't come back because you're now working with a different set of rules and a different reality. And it's like really weird to explain, but it's a book that I think is absolutely fascinating. It's another example of explaining two different doors into this underworld or this other civilization, right? So it's just something that I find absolutely fascinating. And just considering that if there really were that many races of people or ETs here for that long, it would explain a lot of what we see, and we don't have to try and squeeze it into this modern time frame anymore.
Well, Nikola Tesla said that if we want to know the truth about our world, the universe, we'll think in terms of energy, frequency, vibration, ultimately resonance. There's a lot of ancient history researchers going around the world looking at megalithic sites. There's a lot of people delving into other areas of ancient history, some very specific topics. Ultimately, it all comes back down to frequency. And so Elena Danaan has channeled two brothers, Thor Han and Jen Han, from the Pleiades. And Jen Han has said very clearly that the universe is a geometrical frequential hologram, which doesn't mean it's fake. It's as real as it gets. Frequency is the ultimate reality of the universe. And that frequency is part of how they terraform planets. Now, presumably this is also used in building suns and doing all the other things that advanced races are doing. This will sound crazy to people just coming to these topics, but I'm just basically trying to ground it in frequency. And we've talked about the different realms, the different energetic realms. As most people know, we live in 3D, right? Third dimension, third density is another term that secret space program insiders have used, people who have given us the knowledge from their time in the secret space program. And these dimensions seem to be superimposed upon each other. So in other words, when we think about advanced races who are in other realms, let's say, we might think of them as somewhere out there. And they might be out there in space, but they might also be right with us. It's just that we can't see them, as you mentioned. We can't see them because of the frequency that we live in, the third density frequency realm doesn't allow us to see them. They can see us, and and if they want to interact with us, they can come in and interact with us, but we can't see them unless we're in the right frequency. Now, you talked about your meeting with, let's say, did you call them the Sasquatch?
The forest people.
The forest people. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, but I do want to say something before that about the dimensions. So it's something really interesting to consider. There's an Area 51 anonymous whistleblower in 2008 that came out, and he talked about all the dimensions that he was like, space isn't necessarily what you think it is. And he's explaining, like, imagine it like dimensions, like blankets stacked on top of each other. and each blanket is a dimension. And he said in each dimension, even the planets take different forms. Like he said, in one dimension, a planet will look like a gas giant. In the next dimension, it'll look like a solid planet that's booming with life, teeming with life. And he explained that they are aware of a number of dimensions and that you can travel the universe just by shifting frequency. It's all, and that's how jump rooms work. And so you don't have to travel on a physical craft through space, which it might not even be what we think it is anyway. And actually they just travel there in seconds via these jump rooms, right? But he did say that the planets and galaxies and everything exist in all of the dimensions that they're aware of, but each one, they take different forms in each dimension. So that's really interesting to consider. And what was your question again? You asked me about.
Well, just you mentioned your meeting with the forest people and this.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, that's just talking about another advanced race of people that are perceivable to some and imperceivable to others, depending on your frequency. I couldn't see them, but the person I was with was literally communicating with them, and that's how I knew they were there. I could feel a presence, but they had been trying to help us understand everything we're talking about here for millennia, right? But every time that they explain, every time they would approach somebody or communicate with somebody, people get so excited about the experience, and it turns into a story that they go and tell on podcasts and interviews and this and that, but they're not really, the message isn't landing, right? Like, they're not communicating with people just for fun. They're on a mission too, like to help the collective consciousness. And when they encountered us, there was this one being was very like demoralized, and he was just like upset. They feel like they've just been wasting their time because we're just not getting the message, right? We're not taking, like, come on, snap out of it already. But we asked, well, why is this time any differently? And he said specifically that this time, they were told that this time it works. That was specifically what he said. This time it works. So they actually have hope again, and they're communicating with people all over the world again, because we're at a frequency now where it's receivable, and things are actually just somehow like it's like a horse race. It's been described like a horse race, and each horse is a different timeline. Well, there's now a lead horse. There's now a solidified positive timeline, and that horse is going to win the race. So now this time it works, and they can come and help us. So it was a very interesting message. And then there was another group that we encountered of similar type of people, and I wanted to see them. I asked, I said, can you make yourself visible so I can see you? And they started laughing, and I'm like, what's so funny? I thought it was a stupid question. And they said, we're not hiding. We're right here. It's up to you to see us. And they explained it's all about dropping into your heart. It's all about love and dropping into your heart and unconditional love. And that is literally the highway to these other dimensions. And once you're in that frequency, you can traverse the other dimensions, and your heart becomes a highway, and you could go anywhere you want. You could go to Mars, you can go to all these places, but it's all frequency. So I was trying to, like, okay, well, let me just like shift my frequency and let me drop into my heart, and maybe I could see them. But then you start trying too hard. It's not really something that we can mentally comprehend. It's more of a feeling, like a resonance and a frequency. That's a way of life that eventually takes you to that place. But so I couldn't see them, and then I was like, well, can you give us a sign? Like, can you do something? Can you manipulate something in this reality so I could see you? I was like, they're like, what? I was like, can you shake a tree? And they're like, why would we shake our friends? Why would we hurt our friends? Would you shake your friend? That would hurt. And they gave me this whole like spiel about like how trees and plants and everything is living, and it like physically would hurt that tree if they took them and shook them, And I was just like, it was a whole mind-blowing experience, the way we perceive reality and the way we treat things compared to the way they do. And I never did end up physically perceiving them, but the energy, it was undeniable. Like, it was there. The frequency, they were there. I could even sense where they were, but my physical eyes couldn't see them.
Amazing stuff about the forest people. And I think I have something interesting to add here. I personally have a friend, modern day version of Gandalf. His name is Nikolai Onu. Big shout out to him. And he had his life in the Matrix, more or less. until, and he was like drinking a lot and all that. And one day he was out in the forest with his niece. I think his niece was I know, not more than 4 years old, 4 or 5 years old, something like that. So they went through the forest, and he claims he also met the forest people. And not only he, now the niece, that's like 20 something years old, she can confirm the story as well. And they could both see the forest people. They came down from a hill. They were in a pretty in a point where the energies were high. It was known, the point was known for that. So the forest people sees them, and they come down this hill to interact with the niece, especially. And they started giving, they started having a conversation, and they gave a lot of instructions about the natural remedies to this guy, to Nicolae Onu, who then applied all this knowledge to, never drink again, treat all his diseases, and then cure. He started curing people of different diseases through the natural, remedies the forest people taught him. And the interesting part is, when the forest people left, they left no trace on the ground, no traces on the ground. This is what Nicolae Onu describes. And they established a connection, and 1 year after another, they meet at a certain point, I think at this equinox, they meet and exchange. He comes with the questions, and they come with the answers, and then they leave, and they meet the next year again. So it's very interesting. I think we should have both of you as our guests at some point, and discuss about this more in depth. But it's pretty incredible how, there are, again, I think it's the realm of physicality and the realm of energy. Let's put it like this, because there are people living in the forest who just are fed up with their with the cities and all the technology, and they just take refuge in the forest. And they're living like a community in there. And they're also the people that are part energy and part physical. I don't know, the ones that can not shapeshift, but they can transcend dimensions and physicalities. And this is what I think. Those encounters are pretty rare. And it's, for people hearing all these things, is pretty hard to believe, because they haven't encountered something like that. But that doesn't mean it's not true, because there's so many things happening outside in the world while we're staying indoors, and we're spending so much time indoors, and especially in the daylight. And there's so much stuff going on underneath, above us, all around us. Right. I'm saying this as a guy who I've been in the Matrix until about 24, when I was like 24 years old, and I couldn't believe all the stuff. I couldn't even believe the UFOs, and experiencing things like these, out of the ordinary, made me a believer. And I started with the UFO phenomenon, and I saw that it's deeply connected to the the energies and the duality of dimensions. So pretty much this is what happened to me. I'm gonna go really brief to my first UFO encounter that set me up on this path. I was camping with some friends on a hill. It was like a tumuli, had a really interesting name. So it looked like a tumuli, like a massive grave. So at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, we were out having fun, and with our flashlights we started flashing on the sky. And then at some point, not long after we did this, a huge orb the size of the moon, arrived just above the forest. And we were looking at it. I was me and 4 other friends, so I had like witnesses, and we were staring at this thing, and we could see it was moving like this, because it was just above the treetops, and we could see it was going around. We tried to find explanations about this, but we couldn't. And then I think then this spiraled out of control in a series. So it started in August 2015, and then in October I had the second encounter. I was at this event, and then I saw the orb, the orb UFOs, the spheres of light that just pulsate like this and disappear, and they're moving like freely, and no drone is capable of doing that. And they're here and there, and I noticed there are present in high energy places and at events where people generate energy, like the thermic energy. And the thermal energy, and I feel like those orb UFOs are somehow harvesting this energy. So I went down this rabbit hole. I became a UFO researcher. So I did a lot of I had some large communities of people, and I researched everything about UFOs and this stuff, and there were people sending me shocking things happening on the sky. So projections. I had someone in Washington DC. He couldn't get in touch with people, so I did an extensive article on this one, and he saw at Washington DC, was filming with his iPhone the projections on the sky of shape-shifting, holograms, like faces, and the faces at some point was an alien face, it was a baby's face. It was pretty creepy, and he shot it for like 45 minutes. So I know for a long time, and there are so many things that are being classified by governments, not just the USA. Everybody, they've encountered all these, and they said at some point it's good that the public doesn't know about these. Right now they're coming out in the open, they're preparing us, and they're telling us that, hey, we might have had some connection with these energetic beings or whatever they are, and we kind of exchange knowledge, and they're not saying what they paid for that knowledge, but there are tons of abductee testimonies out there. And how do you feel about all this phenomena?
Well, so it's really interesting that they say that the public's not ready for it. I think that's just their way of saying they're not ready to tell them themselves yet. Because here's the thing: if we're born into a reality where all this stuff exists, there's no problem because it's your reality. But whenever you have to introduce it to a programmed civilization, then that's when you do have problems. So if it's really, obviously that's a debate that you can be had all day long, but eventually I think ultimately it would be better if we knew. And the hologram technology, I've even heard whistleblowers explain the holograms becoming so tangible that you can even touch them. Like you wouldn't even know it's a hologram. You could even go and touch it. You would think it's a physical object, which kind of describes what you were talking about earlier with the holographic universe and planets and stuff. But something I wanted to say while I was thinking about it while you said it, they don't know where Genghis Khan is buried. I don't know why this popped into my head, but during our research, there's the Tartar mounds in Poland. They're literally named the Tartar mounds. And my friend, I'm friends with these twins who actually played on these mounds growing up. They used to play on like a playground, and they know a lot of the rumored history. But there's a shrine on top of one of these mounds, and it's like known to the locals that that's the shrine of Genghis Khan, like the Tartarian emperor, as they call them. But it's in this mound. It's still even labeled today a Tartar mound in Poland. Now that's not provable, but that's the rumor, right? So that might be one possible location. But as far as what you were talking about, all this UFO phenomena and everything. Yeah, that's how it started for a lot of people, because the UFO like shows and documentaries and stuff have been on mainstream cable for decades now. You always turn it on and there's a show about UFOs and stuff, and that's predictive programming. But it's always they give you the negative side of the story. It's all bad. They're going to come and invade. All the movies say they're going to come and invade. Well, that's because that's their agenda, and it's most likely, if there is some sort of invasion or false flag attack, it's going to be the governments and the shadow groups and the agencies that are actually attacking ourselves and acting and appearing as ETs, so they can
unite in one world government to protect.
Yeah, the one world government, and so they can maintain a narrative that they're a threat. Oh my God, look, they just attacked us. We can't trust any of them now. When it's quite the opposite. And imagine if you're like an ET race, like you're a race of ETs, and they, let's just say the government attacks ourselves, our own society, our own civilization through their advanced reverse engineered craft, and they blame it on the Pleiadians. Anybody, just pick one. And imagine what that does to the people who are unaware of Pleiadians. You're literally framing like an entire race of people as murderers now. Like if you really think about it in reality, like they're framing like a race of advanced beings as murderers. And think about how that would feel to be a Pleiadian, let's just say. if you're going to put yourself in other people's shoes. I don't know. I know that's really going way out there with this, but it's something to consider. But I think most of what we're seeing now, it's like the government, I don't even know if they want to tell us, but they're like, their hand is being forced for some reason, and they're revealing this slow rollout. And it is collectively changing things across the globe now. And our children are being born into a world where we're not alone. And that does change everything. So they're not going to be ridiculed for sharing their stories of seeing ETs and stuff like that. So ultimately, I think it is a step in the right direction.
We live in a transitional world right now, Tyler. And so we're transitioning from being fully thought controlled in the matrix to a world where we understand that we have a galactic family, that we live in a universe that's teeming with advanced races, and that we're not the first advanced race, as academia tells us, but the last. And we're not that advanced compared to the truly advanced races that exist out there. So when do you think we're going to fully transition to an understanding of our galactic family?
Well, I mean, that's the $1 million question, right? I think it's specific to the individual. I think each one of us like already have come to that understanding. So it's already happening. And then when we understand it, we talk about it, other people understand it. The numbers are probably a lot bigger than we realize. You can go around and ask a lot of people if they believe in ETs or whatever, and it'd be interesting to like, do some sort of study and see the results. But I definitely think the numbers are increasing daily at this point and what people can comprehend and what they believe. As far as like a full awareness of like a Star Trek galactic society, and then we have these, brothers out there in space or whatever. I don't know. I have no idea if that's around the corner or not. For a lot of people, they're already living that reality. And I guess that's all that matters. And I really do think that it's not going to be a big collective thing. I think certain individuals are going to start experiencing and discovering these other realities until enough people do. Then something like the holographic entrance to inner earth might all of a sudden just be there permanently because enough people are at that frequency now and they see it. So it's not like it's just going to all of a sudden be a part of our reality. I don't even think it's going to be a disclosure. It's just going to suddenly just be there because enough of the collective consciousness is now operating in that frequency and perceiving reality through that lens now. And I think that's what it's going to look like ultimately. I don't know if there's going to be a big rollout because it really is energy and frequency. And even if you tell somebody that all this stuff is real, they're not going to believe it. They're going to fight it. A lot of people aren't ready for it, because they have attached their identity to their own belief systems, and their belief systems have molded their reality and you know what I mean? So like your belief molds energy into existence. So what essentially what you believe in does become real, but they're not going to detach themselves from that if this truth comes and contradicts that. And it's up to them to go on their own journey and shift that frequency and to be able to perceive what other people are perceiving. So even if you did roll out and tell the world that this is all happening, some people still literally wouldn't see it because they're just not ready.
Yeah, people hate being wrong. So whenever you say to someone that, hey, you're being lied to, they will just be triggered that, you're assuming that they're wrong. So this kind of, will always keep them on that level of vibration. So that's why it's important for people to, go outside and experiment, and actually set the intention, actually believe for a moment, and the universe will reveal a lot of stuff to you. I mean, even if you're a naysayer, and I've been a naysayer, I was like, I don't believe in all this, in all these things. They're just conspiracies. I cannot prove this. So then it just happened, and then a string of synchronicities have, pulled me out of the matrix, and they kind of smashed me in all ways. It was pretty bad at first, but then I got used to it, and I really loved what you said, about the beings communicating about love and centering yourself like in your heart, because it's what I think of the divine. For me, the divine, it's love, is the power of love. And you might agree with me or not, but I love Jesus as well because he preached about love, so this is the simple. Right. I don't necessarily believe in like they say his father was Yahweh, was definitely an entity part of a pantheon, in the old world before Jesus came. But I enjoy, the idea, the concept of Jesus, and I love Jesus and his energy because he preached about love.
Absolutely.
What the divinity is for me.
Yes, I agree with that too, and I wasn't like knocking all that earlier when I said it. I just said it only explains such a modern segment of our whole history, but the idea of Jesus and the Christ consciousness and whether he was real or not, it certainly is real because enough people believe in it, right? So
Yeah.
it has impacted our reality in a number of ways, and so much that people have devoted their life to it, and then a lot of that has been skewed and mistranslated, and the teachings have been lost, and um they might be intentionally sent down the wrong path and to turn him into some sort of savior, which is exactly the opposite of the real teaching. So, um, playing a crucial role. Jesus is playing a crucial role right now in the evolution of our consciousness.
Right. And Alex Collier has mentioned this too, that the teachings of Jesus are a beautiful and important part of our history. And Jesus is said to have said that the things I do, these things ye shall do greater. It's not that he was above us. He never put himself above us. This was the idea of a controlling group, a control group who wanted to take control of this beautiful message and
Yeah.
then say, we have the access through our priests to the divinity. You have to come to us to get what Jesus alone had as an
Right.
incarnated divine being. So it's all about the control system taking over the
Yeah.
message of a beautiful being.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, that's what they do. So, we interviewed this girl one time on our channel about mind control, Gabby Chung. She's from Australia, and she specializes in satanic ritual abuse, mind control, and the Tavistock document, the whole Tavistock thing. Anyway, she has really good information about all the mind control programs out there in the satanic ritual abuse, and she interviews people weekly. But she what I've noticed, and I'm sorry, Gabby, I love you, but what I've noticed is this is what occurs is once you constantly acknowledge the dark and you're basically validating what they're doing and you're giving them power by constantly focusing on the satanic ritual abuse as your life every single week. And the conclusions she's coming to are that there are no ascended masters, there are no galactic ETs, there are everything that we think we know was all put in place by the Satanists. This is her conclusion, everything. And I'm like, do you not see the program that you've now put yourself in by swimming in that frequency for so long? And she's finding documents and evidence to validate her claims. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, like this is what they love this right now. They would love to be responsible for everything out there. If you're giving them all that power, like when it's not really necessarily true. They're everything that they might be taking responsibility for and she's finding evidence of, that's because there's an organic version of that exists that has been inverted, and that's the reality that has been fed to us. But there's a real organic, beautiful version, loving version of that stuff that is absolutely real, in my opinion. And the reason it's been twisted is so we don't uncover those truths. And her research is leading her to the conclusion that it was all created by the Satanist. Yeah, it was inverted by them, but it wasn't created by them. And that's what we have to realize. And if you just swim in that dark energy for too long, that's all you're going to see. And you're going to start finding things are going to come into your awareness to validate what you believe in. And essentially you could say that she's now living in a different dimension than somebody else who has come to a different realization. And she's a fantastic researcher, and I'm not knocking her. It's just something I've observed.
Right. Well, I think if we acknowledge the dark side, if we research the dark side, that's one thing, but to be enveloped in it is another. Now we
Yeah.
have Neil deGrasse Tyson, we have Elon Musk. talking about how we're searching for aliens, but if we haven't found them by now, and if they haven't contacted us, then obviously we're alone in the universe, and we're going to have to build a rocket to get to Mars because we're the first ones. And it's like,
Right. It's like a
well,
broken record. Yeah.
it's like, yeah, I always think, well, based on the information from the secret space program, insiders whose testimonials corroborate, and that's how we know that they're relevant and true, in their details, we understand that humanity was created with the genetic material of 22 advanced races who came to this planet, and they've tinkered with us over the years. Whether you believe in evolution or not, if evolution does exist as a real phenomenon, that's fine. If because we can still put that together with genetic tinkering. So if we have a natural hominid on Earth, then it's genetically tinkered with to become what we are. So then I say to myself, well, if we're looking for aliens, all we have to do is look in the mirror.
Right.
We have their best genes.
Right.
We are the product of an incredible mixture of advanced races genes. It's a friggin' miracle is what it is. And so if we want to see an advanced race, an advanced alien race, as we call them, I don't think it would be nice to feel like, I don't think we would want to be called aliens if we were advanced races out in space, but we call them aliens. If we wanted to find an advanced race, all we have to do is we can look in the mirror and go, okay, there's 22. I'm looking at 22 advanced races in the mirror.
Right. And that's true. The interview we just did with Forrest Crawford, we talked about a UFO crash retrieval case from the 50s where there was one living ET and two dead ones. And it's one of the most compelling testimonies I've ever heard, with some of the most evidence I've ever seen to back up this case. And it was a 7-year investigation. Anyway, the ET was described as completely human in appearance, from Tau Ceti, from a different star system, but completely human in an appearance. Think about that. He said you would never know the difference if you were walking next to that person in public that it wasn't ET. And then if you want to know what ETs look like, yeah, look in the mirror. Or if you want to know what different races of ETs look like, look around the world, go to different countries, go to different continents, and these different groups, races of people are probably have different genetics from different star systems. And I think that that's pretty much what we would encounter if we were able to travel. And I do think there are other beings, like as above, so below, right? Like every insect, every animal on this planet, there's probably an intelligent form of it somewhere, existing in some other plane, dimension, planet, whatever, that we could encounter as well. So you might not encounter a human 5-star figure, right? Being, but you might encounter something that mimics something that you're already familiar with from this reality.
Talking about materializing our realities. So I think it's pretty much related to the disclosure that's happening recently. So until recently, they pretty much kept the lid on top of things, and now they're releasing all this evidence into the mainstream, making people acknowledge and understand of that different alien species might be out there. We might not be the only ones, and I think it's correlated to the fact that whenever they do the Masonic rituals and all that, in order for the magic or whatever they're doing to be effective, they have to openly show it. They have to openly speak it. They have to, so that's why we see all the signs, and that's why we get all those crumbs of what they're doing at these rituals, because it's important to have it in the open, not secluded. If it's secluded, it's not gonna be effective, but then in the open, it's gonna materialize into it because of the collective consciousness that you're channeling its energy towards.
And they're not powerful behind the curtain, right? They're like the great powerful odds, like they think they are. It's an illusion of power, but they need us. They need us more than we need them. So they put this stuff out in the open because they understand they can't create this stuff on their own. They need the collective consciousness to believe in this so it manifests into a reality. So therefore they can pull it off. So by us believing in their propaganda, it becomes real, and it is the black magic at work. We are the magicians working for them. And they're just presenting the idea to us, and we manifest it into a reality. That's like, I love the example of the last time that they turned on CERN, the Hadron Collider, and everyone was flipping out saying they're gonna open this dark portal on this day, and all these negative beings are gonna come through. Like, that narrative was planted into the collective consciousness, I guarantee you, by these controllers and by these black magicians. And it somehow, it came, that narrative just made its way into the collective like months before they were supposed to turn this machine on. And every truther out there was talking about how CERN is going to open a negative portal on this day. And guess what probably happened? It probably happened because enough people believed in it and talked about it and created that reality. And we have no way of proving one way or another what they did on that day, aside from hearsay. So we can't debunk that or prove it, right? But I know, I feel it in my soul that that information was put out ahead of time to help them open that portal that they were, that's exactly, help them achieve what they were trying to achieve that day.
100%.
Yeah. You're muted, Jock.
It's astounding that they can use our energy against us and for them.
Yeah.
It is true, and your phrase "black magic" I think sums it up perfectly. That's what they're doing. That's literally what black magic is using someone else's energy against them.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the life forms that may have been brought to Earth from other planets, other star systems. Scientists, for people who, are thinking that what we're talking about is totally out there, it's fully understandable. It is totally out there, but there's evidence for it. And even the scientists here on Terra, the real name of our planet, have found that the octopus has no reason for being here. It doesn't have a genetic relation to other beings. And so where did the octopus come from, for instance? And so if you go down that rabbit hole, eventually you're going to come to the idea that advanced races for millions and millions and millions of years have been bringing life forms to this planet, tinkering with life forms on this planet. Evolution may have been occurring as well. So it may have been a natural evolution along with genetic tinkering, along with fully existing life forms being simply brought here and see how they do. So there's a lot going on with the history of biological life forms on this planet that we have not been taught in school. And I think it's time that we allow ourselves to consider. We have two groups that are at odds with each other. They're at loggerheads right now. The creationists and the evolutionists. Let's consider another possibility that both things can be happening. We have created life forms from other planets that are being brought here. We have natural evolution of those created life forms occurring, and genetic tinkering throughout the history, just like there's been genetic tinkering throughout the history of our species.
We can, I mean, you can prove in one lifetime that evolution is occurring. That doesn't mean like that the Darwin theory of evolution is a solid fact, but we can prove that evolution exists. Things are evolving before our eyes every day. So I agree with you. It's really interesting. And as far as the eat animals that might have been brought here, like the octopus, the Thea Uber prophecy, which I know you're familiar with that book, Jack, which I think is a must read for anyone in this field, or who's on their awakening path. But they talk about the kangaroo being one of the animals that was brought here. The Aboriginals, one of the very early races was in Australia, actually, or what we now know as Australia, right? According to this book. And the kangaroos were one of the animals that they brought with them, but the kangaroos couldn't survive. So they call it a black boy plant in Australia. It's like, it looks like a kind of like the cattail plant. So it's like a black cylinder type of plant. Apparently that plant was also brought here, and that's what the kangaroos ate. But then the kangaroo, they couldn't get it to grow in our soil. So it took them generations to eventually get it to grow. But by the time they got it to grow, the kangaroos had evolved, and they have developed a new diet, so they didn't even need the plant anymore by the time they got it to grow. but it's just an interesting story that comes from this book, from this guy who claims to be physically abducted and spent 9 days on another planet. And this is some of the information that he was given, right? So take it or leave it. But regardless, the book will force you to open your mind even a little further than what you thought, So that's why I love stuff that really makes you scratch your head and makes you rethink everything you think you know. And you have to have the humility to self-correct when you're wrong. You have to be, willing to look in the mirror and admit that you've been duped or lied to or whatever it is, and just be open to that change, because if not, you're only doing yourself a disservice, and you're going to be at odds with yourself, and you're actually going to get physically sick, because energy manifests into physical, and it manifests into the physical. And that's where disease comes from. All that energy resides in our organs. When we're not doing energy work and moving all that stuff out, we get sick. And when we reject our true path, and you reject the truth, and you constantly, because you don't want to let go of the lie that you've already attached yourself to, that will manifest in physically. And you might actually get physically sick until you start to accept and allow this new information into your awareness.
Now, you mentioned Mars earlier, and you had we're going to have to wrap this up soon. It's going to be 2 hours in just a few minutes. So that's a lot of intel for people. That's a lot of downloads. But I just wanted to get to touch briefly on this Mars recruitment story that you have. Can you tell people about that just real briefly?
I can do it briefly. It's impossible to tell briefly, and it sounds silly, but before I woke up, I was going through the process of waking up, but before I really had my aha moment, I had no awareness of the secret space program at this time in my life. This man I worked with for years, we carpooled together. I was in construction. Suddenly one day he was escorted off the job by black government vehicles. Nobody knew what happened. I synchronistically ran into him at the park one day, and he told me, he was like, "Oh, you showed up." I'm like, "What do you mean I showed up?" He goes, "You don't think you're here by accident, do you?" And that was the beginning of him literally trying to recruit me to go to Mars with him. He told me he was recruited to go to Mars because the world was supposed to end on Labor Day of 2017, and that a certain group of people are selected to go to Mars. There's this whole thing, but he was literally being told this stuff, and he had all kinds of information about things that he shouldn't have known. And I've known this guy for years, and I thought he was crazy. Everyone else thought he was crazy, but I was still entertaining him. And it ended up being one of the wildest summers of my life, encountering him. And he would teach me about, they control the weather. He would teach me about different timelines. He would teach me about, space programs, jump rooms, time travel, all this stuff. And I was like, "How do you know this?" He goes, "They're just telling me in my head. They're just telling me." And now I look back, I didn't know about voice of God technology, but I guarantee he was a victim of voice of God. And whatever military or three-letter agency was using that technology on him, obviously he was being like recruited into some sort of program, whatever that may have been. And for some reason, he was like literally asked or given permission to like extend the invite to me. And his whole mission that summer was to convince me that all this stuff was real and to go with him. And it was a wild story. That will literally take an hour in minimum to tell in detail, but it was something that I had no awareness of the secret space program at that time. And it wasn't until I heard Laura Eisenhower's story about her being recruited to go to Mars that I even considered that the events that happened with Larry were even real. And I was like, wait, like, was there actually something to that? Because part of me at the time, I was still, whenever you don't want to believe in something, you just like forget about it. You put it on a shelf somewhere and it's just back there until something happens that brings it back to the forefront again, and you revisit it. And then you look back at that time of your life and like, I need to really reconsider what happened to me here, So it was a very interesting time in my life.
Well, I've been tweeting Elon for about a year, telling him about the secret space program and giving him Dan Cooper's link, your interview with Dan Cooper, which is a 3-part interview actually. And because Dan Cooper lays out some of the most fundamental and most amazing basics of the secret space program, and that Elon seems to be not aware of, because if he were aware of it, he wouldn't be spending his time building rockets, since we have anti-grav spacecraft in place.
here's my theory on that. I think he's aware of it. Obviously, there's a whole argument with the firmament. We can't get through the firmament. The rockets can't get through. And there is a graveyard in the Pacific Ocean for all of the space shuttles that have been taken out of service, and that's where they crash land them. You can Google it. It's a whole, I mean, miles of wrecked space shuttles and rockets in the Pacific Ocean. And the whole theory is that they're not even going to space. They're just sending them over there. And that's just how they maintain the show, right? And what if that's true? What if they have always been going to space, but through means of and technology that we just don't understand, that hasn't been disclosed to the public? So maybe they went to the moon, maybe they're doing all this stuff, but they're just going through jump rooms, or they're using these advanced craft that we're not supposed to know about. But they have to keep the dog and pony show going by sending these rockets up and just crash landing them into the Pacific Ocean. Let's just pretend that's the case. What I think Elon Musk is doing is he's sending these rockets up right into the firmament, and they're blowing up. Not one of his rockets are leaving the atmosphere, and he's proving it. They're either exploding upon takeoff, which I think is being done by the elite or the cabal. I think what he's trying to do is show the public that we're not going to space via rockets. And every time he sends a rocket up, it explodes. And the last one, if everyone saw the video, it literally looked like it hits this dome and goes. And I think he's trying to show the public that NASA is bullshit, And I think, honestly, that's just a theory and opinion, but I have yet to see one of his rockets successfully, and all of his rockets launches, the SpaceX rocket launches go up. The NASA rocket launches go like this. And, his are the only ones that are going straight up and hitting something and exploding. Well, but if it takes off, maybe they're crash landing it in the Pacific Ocean.
I mean, we could go forever, right, Tyler? So why don't we just say that this is good? We did a good job, let's say, excavating the matrix, looking at our place within the matrix and the possibilities for people to find their way out day by day, right? It doesn't have to happen in one day. We can climb the ladder day by day, awaken to new truths day by day. It's okay. Take the journey as you wish, at the speed that you want to take the journey. And so I'm really happy with what's been disclosed today by you, Tyler, and I really appreciate your knowledge. I mean, you've been interviewing these secret space program insiders for almost 5 years, and your depth of knowledge is absolutely fantastic. So I'm in deep appreciation of you. I resonate with you deeply as a friend. I really feel a strong friendship with you, a strong kinship.
Right.
And so
yeah, I appreciate that.
Thank you for coming, and I know Raz is really appreciative of you too. I didn't even know that Raz had all these incredible UFO encounters, so I'm learning about Raz as we go, and I've known him for years. So wow, this all came out. So I appreciate both of you, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
And by the way, I think Excavating the Matrix would be a great title for this episode. Yeah, I love that, Excavating the Matrix.
That's great.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on, and I'll do a little shameless self-promotion here.
Yeah.
If you guys haven't, you can go subscribe to us, Journey to Truth podcast on Rumble, Apple Podcast, YouTube. YouTube's really censoring us, but we're still going strong until we can't there anymore. We've been doing it, as Jock said, for 5 years now. So it's turned into so much more, and we're putting on our third conference, which is coming up in May 13th through the 16th in Grafton, Illinois, 2024. And it's called Rebels of Disclosure. And if you're interested in coming to that event, there still are tickets available, and all the information is available at rebelsofdisclosure.com. And if you want access to our bonus exclusive content, Journey to Truth has our Patreon now, where we do bi-monthly webinars, where we take all the stuff we've learned over the past 5 years, and we pick specific topics to really dive deep on, and we put together a 2 to 3 hour presentation, a webinar on that topic, and we just dissect it. And really the whole goal with that is for like beginners or new people. Like we throw this stuff around and terms around and theories around that we've already come to understand, but a new person might be like, whoa, I'm lost. What is that? I've never even heard that word before. So we're taking some of the big topics and we're breaking it down and we're explaining it as if somebody has never heard of it before. And then we take them from start to finish with whatever it is. You know, we've done one on like we call it UFOs for dummies, like the whole history of UFOs starting from the 1800s all the way up until current. We did a clone webinar, a whole webinar on cloning, everything we could find, dating all the way back to way earlier than you think up till now. We've done the Voice of God webinar on the Voice of God technology, explaining that and proving that. And we did one on DUMBs, the military DUMBs. We've done one on Hollow Earth and the Agartha Network. And the newest one coming up is Tartaria, which is a really fun one. But you can find those over on our Patreon.
And your Patreon is J2T, Journey to Truth.
Yeah, and if you just go to our any of our episodes and just go to the video description, there'll be a link for the Patreon there.
Right. Well, we're at exactly 2 hours, so I appreciate your time. I know you're super busy doing stuff, and you're a strong force for good, for awakening, and I know that humanity is going to benefit greatly from all the knowledge that you and your co-host Aaron are bringing out on Journey to Truth. So thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. This was a blast.
Tyler. It was really fun talking, and hope to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely.